The first question is, how will your congressional experience give you an advantage as governor to get Michigan's economy back on track and put us back to work?
I think it's very straightforward. You need to have someone who understands the legislative process, who understands how a legislative body works. This governor has said it herself, that one of her big drawbacks is she didn't understand how a legislative body works. Okay, I know, it's a terrible thing. I know how to go through a process and get to an agreement and get something done. After 9/11, Jane Harmon, Joe Lieberman, Susan Collins, and myself were given the task of rewriting the legislation that governed a $50 billion business called the intelligence community. We got it done. We got it done on a bipartisan basis. Michigan, we're going to go through another, 10 months here now where nothing's going to happen in Lansing. There's not going to be any fundamental reform. That may be good, okay. But if you get a governor in with a right plan, you got to have a governor that knows how to go into a legislature and say, this is where we're going, and I need you to get there, and we're going to sit around this table until it gets done. Okay, so I think that whether you're dealing with a legislative body in Congress or whether you're dealing with it in Lansing, you need to know how a legislature works and how a legislator thinks. One quick example. Governor comes to, she's doing her jobs tour last week, right after the State of the State speech. So she's going to Tierra Yachts in Holland. The guy's a friend of mine. We've done a lot of things with him. And he says, Pete, we're going to have our economic development manager speak. I want you to speak for 3 minutes, and then the governor's going to speak. Thursday night, I get an email that says, the governor looked at the agenda. She doesn't want you to speak. I call up Dave, and he thinks I'm going to be all mad. And I said, Dave, no, we're friends. This says more about her than it does me. She's taken the celebration that you're going to create 1,000 jobs, and she's trying to make it into a partisan event. Rather than us all coming into your factory and celebrating, she's saying it's all about me and it's not about the legislator. That's backwards. So she burns bridges. You go into someone's district like that, you recognize that you're on their home turf, you're their guest, rather than I'm the governor and you're lucky to be a senator or a congressman in my state. And you need to understand those nuances because they do make a difference.
Your first 90 days in office, what would be your #1 priority and what would be your agenda during that first 90 days in office?
The agenda is very straightforward. The first thing you need to do is you need to get a team in place because the governor can't do this by themselves. You got to get a group of people because the one thing the governor can do that he doesn't need a legislature for and can do day one, can do on the afternoon of January 1, because the governor's going to find out in the afternoon of January 1 that he's been in office for an hour and he's already got a $500 million deficit. Okay? You've already screwed it up and you've only been here an hour. All right? So you're going to have to get to work on January 1. You need a great team to go in and get the bureaucracy under control so that when people start wanting to build a power plant, wanting to build a house, wanting to do some project, that the bureaucracy understands that there's a new person in town and the answer is we will get to yes. And I think the classic cases, I talk about Henrietta Trout Farms. This is all seriousness. The infrastructure is decaying. He's got 2 quarters of record sales and earnings. We don't have many of those in Michigan. And the answer is the day you put a shovel in the ground, we'll shut you down. I want the person from DEQ to come to my office the next day, and he could come in, if he was there on Monday, he'd come in Tuesday morning and say, that is great. Thank you for protecting Michigan's natural resources. That's the good news. Now the bad news is since Henrietta Trout Farms is now out of business, I'm going to have to lay you off. Friday's your last day. Okay? There's a connection. If the people of Michigan aren't doing well, you as a state employee can't be doing well. So I got to get a hold of the bureaucracy, which means I need good people at the top level who can go in and get a hold of the bureaucracy. The second thing is to go through and work with the legislature and find those $2 to $3 billion worth of cuts and then do the structural reform. I am in favor of spreading the sales tax onto some services, and generating enough revenue to get rid of the business tax. Okay? That's the agenda. Bottom line is, you can't do any of the other things that this state needs to have done unless you've got an economy that's growing and creating jobs.
I'm just going to ask a couple more common questions, and then I am going to turn you over to the
As long as you don't throw your shoes, I'm okay.
Many economic studies and analysis oftentimes point to right-to-work states as being more competitive than ours. What is your position on right-to-work?
You know, I've been a right-to-work guy. I'm not going to put it on the top of my agenda. If you want to go to right-to-work and you want to put it on a ballot initiative, it can't happen in the first 90, it can't happen in the first 180, it can't happen in the first 270 days of a new governor's regime. Okay? It's got to go through a ballot initiative. If you want to go and put it on a ballot initiative and raise the money and do all of those types of things, go for it. Recognize that you will have, you know, all-out warfare in the state for as long as that thing is out there. And if it wins and you get, if you get it turned around and we become a right-to-work state, expect that the unions will come back and you'll have warfare for another couple of years because they'll come back and try to overturn it. Capital hates uncertainty. Okay? So I'm a right-to-work guy, but when people have said, is this going to be one of your #1 objectives going into the governor's office, the answer has been no, because the last thing I want to do is give them more uncertainty where people who have money to invest look at Michigan and say, we'll come back when you grow up and decide who you're going to be. Okay? I got to do those other 3 things first. Vodka, yes. Let's see, wrong reputation here. I don't drink that.
I know you face your own gridlock in Washington, but with the gridlock in Lansing, what is your view of term limits in Michigan?
I really think that what term limits have forced us to do is to take short-term solutions. People are looking for how they survive their 6 or 8 years in office without thinking about what the long-term consequences will be, because they're not there for the long-term consequences. So much of what we've seen are getting through the next 2 years, getting through the next 4 years. That's the problem with the system. Michigan needs to have a long-term direction, long-term stability, and confidence. Again, if people are going to risk their money, they want to have an idea that the economic climate that they're investing in is long-term, has long-term stability and predictableness, and we have not had that in Michigan.
Okay, now's your chance. I'm going to take 2 questions from the floor. We have time for 2 more questions.
Yes, sir.
Hi. Tax issue. 2 possibilities. What do you think of them? Number 1, raising the sales tax by 1 penny, which would be paid in part by tourists. And number 2, piggybacking our income onto the federal income tax, which would save a lot of money for everybody.
The 2 questions. What about raising the sales tax by a penny and flipping over to our income tax off of the federal? My preference, I don't have a problem with raising the sales tax because I think if I raise the sales tax, I can do a couple of things on property tax. Like I said, I do want to go after homestead property tax. I also want to go after the statewide 6 mills that we pay on residential property. Okay. And well, then I'm assuming the MBT is already gone. Okay. When we spread it to services. My preference on the income tax, rather than piggybacking it, you can do 2 things to make it really simple. Piggyback it off of the federal tax, saying, you know, it's going to be, 3% of what you pay at the federal level, or you go to a very simple flat tax here in Michigan. So either, ultimately, if you ask me where I would be, the taxes that would be coming into the state would be a sales tax on products and services, and probably a flat tax, because I haven't figured out yet how to get all the way to a fair tax, okay? And there would be no state property tax anymore. So you basically have 2 taxes coming to Lansing.
The flat tax would be piggybacked on the adjusted gross income on the federal return.
Yeah, it could. Yeah.
Then you don't have a graduation issue.
Oh yeah, I'm not going with a graduated income tax. No way. Okay.
Another question.
The principles of taxation are transparency, simplicity, broad-based, low rates. Okay?